If you think about most decorated American warships, there's a couple options that come to mind. Enterprise, obviously, as the most decorated warship of World War II. There's also New Jersey as the most decorated battleship, though this came from multiple wars. And of course, O'Bannon holds her place as the most decorated destroyer. But I can hear the question, what about the most decorated cruiser? Well, this honor goes to the unassuming USS San Diego, one of the very light Atlanta-class cruisers. Probably. This ship is often cited as earning 18 battle stars, putting her just behind the 20 that Enterprise earned, making San Diego the second most decorated American warship of the Second World War. That said, you'll also see the ship only given 15 battle stars, including in the Dictionary of American Naval Fighting Ships, which would put her behind San Francisco with her 17 and Presidential Unit citation. Still, most sources will continue to cite San Diego as the more decorated ship. She would fight in almost every major battle of the Pacific War from Guadalcanal to Okinawa, including being the first major warship to enter Tokyo Bay at the end of the war. No matter how many battle stars you believe she earned, this ship was a veteran, made all the more impressive for how lightly built she really was. After all, San Diego was, as noted, one of the Atlanta-class light cruisers. These ships were built light as part of their often confusing and conflicted design process. While ultimately pressed into the air defense role, these ships were originally intended as flotilla or destroyer leaders. For this role, speed and firepower were considered the more important features, especially for a limited tonnage of around 6,700 tons standard and 8,300 tons when fully loaded. Ultimately, this resulted in a ship with a lot of destroyer-scale guns. As a first-generation Atlanta, that meant no fewer than 16 5-inch 38 caliber guns on San Diego. These were carried in 8 twin mountings, 3 ahead of the bridge and 3 on the stern, with the final pair carried on either side of the aft superstructure. Those guns are why the ships were pressed into air defense. That was a lot of dual-purpose 5-inch guns. 3 Fletcher's worth if you want to be specific. To support those, the Atlantas initially carried 16 of the finicky 1.1-inch cannon and 4 of the quad Chicago piano mounts. Those would be replaced as soon as possible by 40mm Bofors. For San Diego, that meant a 1-to-1 replacement by 1945. 4 quad Bofors mounts for 16 barrels, supported in turn by 13 20mm cannon, with the weaponry rounded off by 8 torpedoes and 2 quad mounts, alongside depth charge racks on the stern. Atlantas are sometimes described as overfed destroyers due to this weapon's layout. Armor protection, meanwhile, suffered a bit in the name of light tonnage. San Diego had a belt of 3.75 inches at its thickest, or for metric viewers, 95 millimeters, thinning down to just over an inch or 28 millimeters, while the deck was just 1.25 inches thick or 32 millimeters. Which brings us to the speed to round things off. This wasn't quite as fast as you'd expect at 32.5 knots on 75,000 shaft horsepower, through 2 shafts. Not slow, but also in line with other American cruisers. Regardless, that wraps up the design. So now we can move to the service history, which again was quite extensive no matter how many battle stars you think the ship earned. Not that anyone could have expected this when the ship was laid down on March 27, 1940. The third of the Atlanta-class cruisers, San Diego was built by the Four Rivers Shipyard, and they built her quickly at that. The ship was launched a little over a year later on July 26, 1941, and commissioned on January 10, 1942. She took less than 2 years from keel laying to commissioning. Quite a good thing, considering she also joined service a month after Pearl Harbor, a time when the Navy needed every ship they could get their hands on for the Pacific War. As such, San Diego would have an abbreviated shakedown cruise. By May 1942, the ship was sailing for the Pacific, arriving at her namesake city on May 16th or 17th, depending on the source, 1942. She would spend the rest of the month training off the California coast in order to finish working up. This was largely uneventful, though the crew did get up to the usual shore leave shenanigans. For example, a member of the engineering crew got drunk on shore leave. When a police officer rounded him up, the man was taken in. Why? Because the ship was so new that an officer in San Diego didn't even know there was a ship named San Diego in service. Similarly, when the paymaster tried to cash a check, the bank teller told him off. "Get out of here, there's no ship named San Diego." It does show wartime secrecy in full effect. That said, other than the events ashore, not much of note would happen. USS San Diego would ultimately depart her namesake city on June 1st, 1942. This would be her last time in the city until after the war came to an end. When she left, San Diego would escort the recently repaired USS Saratoga. The two ships sailed towards Pearl Harbor as quickly as possible, but still arrived on June 6th, too late to participate in the Battle of Midway. As such, San Diego missed the early war battles, Coral Sea, Midway, and the like. After this, however, that wouldn't really be the case. San Diego would spend June and July training off of Pearl Harbor. It would only be in mid-August that the ship would sail for proper combat duty. In this, the cruiser escorted the carrier USS Hornet as they set off for the Solomon Islands. More specifically, they moved to support the operations at Guadalcanal. Those had already begun, of course, on August 7th. That doesn't mean that San Diego was sailing for a quiet front. As anyone who studied the Pacific War can tell you, Guadalcanal was a long haul. San Diego's first stint would last 41 days, supporting the Marines ashore by covering the carriers. Unfortunately, this meant that San Diego was present to see two of those lost. She was part of the screen for USS Wasp when that ship was sunk by I-19 on September 15th of 1942. That was her first carrier loss. The second would come a month and a half later at the end of October, the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands on October 26, 1942. Though this was actually her second combat operation. The first came in raiding some other islands. As for Santa Cruz, San Diego would be part of the close escort for USS Hornet. The cruiser and her crew fought hard against the Japanese air attacks, but ultimately Hornet would be struck several times and crippled. Attempts to tow her by USS Northampton would fail, and the carrier was ultimately left abandoned after a failed scuttling attempt. The Japanese would later come upon the drifting hulk, where their own destroyers finished the job. San Diego wasn't able to protect Hornet, but her crew did keep their own ships safe. She didn't take a single hit, despite being credited with downing 3 aircraft, including a torpedo bomber directly astern. Moreover, San Diego picked up 200 of Hornet's survivors. The cruiser would remain off the Solomons, continuing to provide support duty, including escort work for the damaged USS Enterprise during the naval battle of Guadalcanal. This was pretty uneventful for San Diego, though Enterprise's flyers contributed to sinking or damaging multiple Japanese ships, including the first battleship loss of the war in the form of Hiei on November 13th. After this, San Diego would remain in the area through the new year, mostly on patrol or escort duty, including covering Enterprise during the Battle of Rennell Island. That took place at the end of January 1943. Soon after this, San Diego, worn down after months at sea, got some much-needed rest. The cruiser sailed for New Zealand on March 14th, 1943, while giving the worn-out crew some proper shore leave, something the men, by all accounts, took full advantage of. Partying, picking up local girls, all the kinds of things you expect of sailors on shore leave. Once this was done at the end of March, the cruiser returned to New Caledonia. She would mostly operate on training and patrol duty in that general area, sometimes sailing to the New Hebrides as well. This would see her operate with USS Saratoga and HMS Victorious as they trained together, with the only real break coming in the invasion of New Georgia. This came at the end of June 1943, though the campaign lasted until the start of October. This relatively peaceful time would come to an end in November. San Diego rejoined her old friend Saratoga, along with USS Princeton, to support further operations in the Solomons, including their famous raids on Rabaul on November 5th and 11th. Soon after this, she sailed towards the Central Pacific to join the operations in the Gilbert Islands. More specifically, the invasions of Macon and Tarawa from November 20th to the 24th of 1943. All of this was good work and continued to see the ship evade any damage of her own. By this point, San Diego was getting a reputation as a lucky ship, and a hard-working, good ship as well. That said, hard-working also means wearing out. That stint in New Zealand aside, the ship hadn't seen a proper refit for nearly 2 years. As such, San Diego and her sister San Juan set off for California in December 1943. She would arrive at Mare Island in mid-December, after a stopover at Pearl Harbor on December 9th to escort the damaged USS Lexington. This refit would fix up wear and tear while also adding modern radar and 40mm Bofors guns, with San Diego returning to Pearl Harbor by January 1944. For the remainder of 1944, San Diego would sail up and down the Pacific with the Fast Carrier Task Force, covering those ships from air attack as they raided Japanese holdings, and supporting the capture of the Marshall Islands. From January to March, San Diego was kept quite busy. She would have another short stint in San Francisco as well, but would rejoin the fast carriers by May 1944, just in time for more raids from Wake Island to the Bonin Islands. All of these were important actions, though San Diego was largely limited to covering the carriers, something that continued into June, for the capture of the Marianas. San Diego would support the invasion of Saipan on June 15th, as well as covering the fleet during the Battle of the Philippine Sea from June 19th to June 20th. This pattern would continue through to October 1944, from Peleliu to the Philippines and Formosa, with that last one in particular seeing more excitement for San Diego. She was assigned to help escort the crippled Houston and Canberra to safety on October 14th, after those two ships were hit by Japanese torpedoes. After this, the next excitement for San Diego came not from enemy attack, but from Mother Nature. She would ride out Typhoon Cobra on December 17, 1944. Some superficial damage was done to the ship as she rolled up to 50 degrees. Despite this, San Diego came out largely unharmed with no crew losses. As 1944 shifted to 1945, San Diego's story continued in much the same way. She would cover the carriers as they struck Japanese targets, from Iwo Jima in February to Okinawa in March, including a break for shore bombardments of Okino Daito, 195 miles east of Okinawa. Beyond this, the ship was largely occupied on support duty, with one further exception at the end of April. San Diego would help escort the crippled destroyer Haggard after she was hit by a kamikaze, in addition to taking on 31 of the destroyer's wounded crew. After this, San Diego rounded off the war on more escort duty, including off Japan, where she was covering the carriers as the Japanese surrendered on August 15, 1945. San Diego would be chosen by Admiral Halsey as the first major warship to enter Tokyo Bay, something she did on August 27, 1945, a fitting tribute to a ship that had fought long and hard for 3 years, without suffering any notable damage or losses to her crew. That said, the ship wouldn't be present for the formal surrender ceremony on September 2nd. The cruiser departed back home that day to get a much-needed overhaul, arriving on September 14th, 1945. While San Diego would still have a little bit of service after this in Operation Magic Carpet runs, her career came to an end soon after. She would be decommissioned on November 4th, 1946, and put in reserve, with the ship ultimately scrapped in 1959 after never leaving that reserve. A quiet end to an understated fighting ship. San Diego wasn't quite as famous as other ships due to lacking big-name moments. But regardless of if you accept 15 or 18 battle stars, she gave good service, a reliable workhorse in the background. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and I'll see you in the next one.